All right, so today we're going to dive deep into the SolarWinds Breach fallout.
Okay.
And specifically the long tail of it.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that massive cybersecurity event back in 2020?
I do, yeah.
The one that targeted SolarWinds Orion software
Yeah.
used by tons of big businesses and government agencies?
Mm-hmm.
Well, get this.
Okay.
Some companies are now facing SEC fines in 2024, years after the initial,
Well,
dust settled.
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so
It really speaks to the long-term implications of a breach of this magnitude.
it does.
Yeah,
So let's set the stage for our listener a little bit.
sure.
This was a supply chain attack.
Right.
What made it so insidious compared to, say, your run-of-the-mill data breach?
Well, you can think of it like this.
Okay.
Instead of directly attacking their targets, the hackers cleverly injected malicious code into SolarWinds software updates. And those updates were then innocently downloaded by a vast network of users,
Right.
including Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, you name it.
Wow. So it was like a Trojan horse slipping in undetected
Exactly.
and giving the attackers like a back door into all these systems.
A backdoor, yeah.
Yeah.
And because the updates were digitally signed by SolarWinds, they bypassed security checks,
Oh, wow.
making them appear legitimate.
So they just sailed right through.
Yeah,
The scope and the sophistication are pretty staggering.
he was, yeah.
And fast forward to today, the SEC is dropping the hammer on 4 companies.
Okay.
Avaya, Checkpoint, Mimecast, and Unisys.
Mm-hmm.
What's their beef with these companies years later?
Yeah.
Did they somehow play a part in the hack?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The issue here isn't their role in the hack itself,
Got it.
but rather how they handled disclosures about their own compromises in the aftermath.
Okay.
The SEC's accusing them of being, shall we say, less than transparent with investors about the extent of the damage.
Oh, so we're talking about the cover-up, not the crime itself.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
The SEC is drawing a line in the sand. They're essentially saying, look, we get that breaches happen,
Right.
but in this day and age, you can't just sweep things under the rug.
Yeah.
You owe it to your investors and the public to be upfront about the impact.
And they're putting their money where their mouth is with these fines.
Absolutely.
Unisys got hit the hardest.
Yeah, $4 million penalty.
Ouch! What did they do to warrant that?
They were aware of 2 major data exfiltration events. We're talking sensitive data being siphoned off.
Right.
But they downplayed it publicly.
Oh, wow.
They basically framed cybersecurity risks as a hypothetical what if when they had evidence of a this happened situation.
So a classic case of don't ask, don't tell.
You could say that
Yeah.
the SEC saw right through it.
Yeah, I bet.
The other companies, Avaya, Checkpoint, and Mimecast,
Okay.
they all had their own flavors of vagueness or downplaying the severity.
Right.
Avaya, for example, fess up to email compromise, but conveniently failed to mention that their cloud files were also impacted.
So it sounds like the SEC is making an example of these companies.
It does seem that way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shot across the bow for any company thinking of taking the hope it goes away approach to a breach.
So walk me through this.
Okay.
Avaya, Checkpoint, Mimecast, and Unisys all received different fines, right?
They did, yes.
What gives? Why the discrepancies?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart of what the SEC is trying to do here.
Okay.
They're not just slapping on fines arbitrarily.
Right.
The amount of each penalty reflects the specific actions, or in some cases, inactions, of each company. Yeah.
Okay, so give our listener a rundown.
Sure.
What's the difference between $1 million fine and, say, a $4 million fine?
Well, the severity of the breach,
Uh-huh.
the degree of transparency, and the potential impact on investors
Right.
all factor into the equation.
Yeah.
In Unisys' case, the combination of downplaying 2 major data exfiltration events
Right.
and their attempts to frame the risks as hypothetical rather than actual tipped the scales.
Yeah.
It suggested a deliberate effort to mislead,
Uh-huh.
and the SEC clearly wasn't having it.
So what did the other companies do that was so bad?
Well, Avaya's case is interesting.
Okay.
They admitted to the email compromise, which, let's be honest, is pretty hard to sweep under the rug,
Yeah.
but they neglected to mention the cloud files.
Right.
Now, whether that omission was deliberate or just an oversight is up for debate,
Sure.
but from the SEC's perspective, it's still a failure to provide a complete and accurate picture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what about Checkpoint and Mimecast? How did they end up in the SEC's crosshairs?
Checkpoint, ironically, a cybersecurity firm,
Oh, wow.
chose to be intentionally vague in their statements.
Sure.
It's like a chef refusing to list all the ingredients in their secret sauce.
Okay.
The SEC wants to see the full recipe.
Right.
Mimecast's misstep was downplaying the quantity of compromised code and credentials.
Okay.
It's a bit like saying, oh, just a few termites in the foundation, no biggie. The SEC wants to know the extent of the infestation, so to speak.
So it's not just about acknowledging a breach. It's about being specific, transparent, and, dare I say, a little bit technical in your disclosures.
Precisely.
This all seems like a pretty major shift in how companies need to approach cybersecurity, both from a prevention and a disclosure standpoint.
It's a watershed moment.
Yeah.
The SEC isn't messing around.
Right.
And the message to corporate America is loud and clear.
Okay.
Get your cybersecurity act together, and if something happens, don't try to hide it. Because the truth will come out, and it might cost you a lot more than just your reputation.
Yeah. Well, these companies are certainly learning that the hard way.
They are.
But I think the bigger question is, what does all this mean for companies who haven't been caught in the SEC's web?
That's where the real story lies.
Okay.
And that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, these SEC actions, they really serve as a powerful precedent, you know. It's a wake-up call for companies to really rethink their approach to cybersecurity.
So what's the game plan for companies who want to stay out of the SEC's crosshairs?
Right.
Is it just about throwing more money at cybersecurity, or is there like a more strategic approach they need to take?
It's not just about the money, although adequate investment is certainly crucial.
Sure.
It's about shifting from a reactive mindset to a proactive one.
Okay, let's break that down.
Yeah.
What does that look like in practice?
Think of it like building a house.
Yeah. Yeah.
You wouldn't wait for a storm to hit before reinforcing your roof or checking your foundation.
Right.
You do those things up front as part of the design and construction process.
So you're saying companies need to kind of bake security into the very DNA of their operations?
Precisely. And that's where the concept of secure by design comes into play.
Okay.
It's about integrating security considerations into every stage of the software development lifecycle, from the initial design phase to deployment and beyond.
I remember we touched on that earlier. SolarWinds themselves are now striving to be a secure by design organization.
Right.
How does that translate into like concrete actions? What are they actually doing differently?
It's not just lip service.
Okay.
They're overhauling their processes, implementing things like threat modeling, where they anticipate potential attacks and design defenses accordingly.
Oh, interesting.
They're also incorporating automated security testing into their development pipeline, catching vulnerabilities early on.
So it's about catching those termites before they even get a chance to nibble at the foundation.
Exactly.
Oh,
and they're also embracing the concept of least privilege,
okay,
which limits user access to only the information and systems they absolutely need.
So fewer master keys floating around makes sense.
Right?
But all of this sounds pretty technical.
Yeah.
What about the human element? How do companies address that?
Yeah.
After all, people make mistakes, click on phishing links, fall for scams.
That's a critical point.
Yeah.
Technology alone isn't enough.
Right.
You can have the most sophisticated security systems in the world,
Sure.
but if your employees aren't trained to spot phishing emails or practice good password hygiene, you're still vulnerable.
So it's about creating a culture of cybersecurity awareness throughout the organization.
It is, yeah.
Everyone from the CEO to the intern needs to be on the same page.
Absolutely. Regular training programs,
Okay.
simulated phishing campaigns, clear and concise security policies.
Right.
These are all essential components of a strong cybersecurity posture.
Okay, so companies are taking all these proactive measures.
Right.
They're investing in technology. They're
Yeah.
training their employees. But let's face it, breaches can still happen.
They can, yeah.
What's the playbook if, despite their best efforts, a company finds themselves staring down the barrel of a cybersecurity incident?
That's where having a robust incident response plan comes in.
Okay.
It's like a fire drill, right?
Yeah.
You don't wait for a fire to break out before figuring out how to evacuate the building.
Right, right. So walk me through this incident response plan. What are the key steps?
First and foremost, you need to contain the breach.
Okay.
Stop the bleeding, so to speak.
Right.
This might involve isolating affected systems, resetting passwords, patching vulnerabilities. Then you move into the investigation phase.
Okay.
Who are the attackers?
Right.
What data was compromised? How did they get in?
And this is where like forensic experts come in, right? The digital detectives who piece together the clues.
They're like the CSIs of the cyber world.
Yeah.
Once you have a handle on the scope of the breach, you can start the remediation process, fixing the damage, restoring systems, notifying affected parties.
And of course, this is where those SEC disclosures come into play.
Absolutely.
Companies need to be prepared to explain what happened, be transparent about the impact,
Right.
and do so in a timely manner.
Transparency is key,
Yeah.
both to maintain trust with stakeholders and to comply with regulatory requirements.
It sounds like there's a lot riding on those initial decisions made in the heat of the moment.
There is, yeah. And that's why it's so crucial for companies to have a clear and well-rehearsed incident response plan in place.
Right.
Those early decisions can have significant legal and financial ramifications down the line,
Yeah.
as we've seen with these recent SEC charges.
Well, it all seems like a pretty tall order.
Yeah.
But if companies can successfully navigate all of this, the proactive measures, the incident response, the transparent disclosures, does that mean they're completely off the hook?
Well,
Is there still a chance they could face repercussions years down the line?
that's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the evolving nature of cybersecurity risk.
Let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
What do you mean by evolving risk?
The threat landscape is constantly shifting.
Right.
New vulnerabilities are discovered, attack techniques evolve, regulations change.
Mm-hmm.
What might be considered best practice today could be deemed negligent tomorrow.
So it's like a moving target.
It is.
Companies can't just check the box and say, okay, we're good.
Exactly. Cybersecurity is a continuous journey, not a destination.
Mm.
It requires ongoing vigilance, adaptation, and a willingness to constantly reassess and improve.
And to think all of this stems from one major breach, the SolarWinds hack back in 2020.
It's true.
It's amazing to see how one event can have such far-reaching and long-lasting consequences.
It's a testament to the interconnectedness of our digital world.
Yeah.
What might seem like an isolated incident can have ripple effects that spread far and wide.
I know we've been talking a lot about the big picture, the impact on companies and the regulatory landscape.
Right.
But what about the average person? How does all of this affect them?
Yeah.
Most of us aren't CEOs or CISOs grappling with SEC regulations.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is, it affects all of us.
Okay.
Think about the companies we interact with every day. Banks, healthcare providers, online retailers.
Right.
They all hold sensitive information about us. And if they're not taking cybersecurity seriously, we're all at risk.
It's like a chain reaction.
It is.
A breach at one company can have a ripple effect that impacts countless individuals.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important for us as individuals to be aware of the risks and to take steps to protect ourselves.
So what can the average person do to stay safe in this increasingly treacherous digital landscape?
There are actually a lot of simple but effective things you can do, and that's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about the fallout from the SolarWinds hack and the importance of proactive cybersecurity measures for companies.
Right.
And the role of the SEC in enforcing disclosure regulations. Yeah. But let's get down to brass tacks, for our listener.
Yeah.
What can they do to protect themselves in their everyday digital lives?
It's all about building good cyber hygiene habits.
Okay.
Think of it like washing your hands. You do it regularly without even thinking about it to prevent the spread of germs. Cyber hygiene is the same concept, but for the digital world.
Okay, so walk me through a typical day.
Sure.
What are some practical tips that people can implement right now?
Let's start with passwords. Use strong, unique passwords for every account. I know it's tempting to reuse the same one.
Yeah.
But it's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your office.
Right.
If someone gets hold of it, they have access to everything.
So no more password 123. Got it.
Definitely not. And consider using a password manager. It's like a secure vault for all your passwords, so you only have to remember one master password.
That sounds a lot easier than trying to remember a dozen different complex passwords.
It is, yeah.
What else? What about email? We all get tons of emails every day.
We do.
How do we know which ones are safe to open and which ones are phishing attempts?
Be wary of emails from unknown senders.
Okay.
Especially if they contain attachments or links.
Right.
Look out for red flags like misspellings, grammatical errors, or urgent requests for personal information.
So if you get an email from your bank asking for your account number and social security number, that's a big no-no.
Absolutely. Yeah. Legitimate organizations will never ask for sensitive information via email. And if you're ever in doubt, contact the organization directly through their official website or phone number.
Okay, it's always better to err on the side of caution, right?
It is.
What about social media?
Yeah.
We share so much of our lives online these days.
Right.
Are there any cybersecurity risks there that we should be aware of?
Social media is a prime target for hackers. Be careful about what information you share publicly.
Okay.
Avoid posting things like your home address, phone number, or travel plans. And be wary of friend requests from people you don't know.
So don't accept that friend request from the Nigerian prince who wants to share his fortune with you.
Exactly. And be skeptical of links or messages that seem too good to be true. Like winning a free vacation or a shopping spree, it's likely a scam.
So common sense goes a long way in the digital world.
It does.
What else?
Another simple but effective measure is to keep your software updated.
Okay.
Software updates often include security patches that fix vulnerabilities.
Right.
So whenever you see that little notification pop up, don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Take a few minutes to update your system. It could save you a lot of trouble down the road.
Okay, so strong passwords, email vigilance, social media smarts, keep your software updated. What else should people keep in mind?
Be mindful of public Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Avoid accessing sensitive information like online banking or shopping accounts when connected to public Wi-Fi networks. These networks are often unsecured, making it easy for hackers to intercept your data.
So save the online shopping spree for when you're back home on your secure network.
Exactly. And if you absolutely must use public Wi-Fi, consider using a VPN.
Okay.
It creates a secure, encrypted connection, making it much harder for hackers to snoop on your activity.
VPN. Got it.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But it sounds like practicing good cyber hygiene isn't about being a tech whiz.
Right.
It's about being aware and developing those good digital habits.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And the good news is, even small changes can make a big difference in your overall cybersecurity posture. It's all about taking those incremental steps to protect yourself and your information.
So it's a bit like building a muscle.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is an ongoing process, not a one-time fix.
Right.
And just like physical fitness, it requires effort and consistency, but the rewards are well worth it.
Absolutely. Well, we've talked about the fallout from the SolarWinds hack.
Yes.
The importance of proactive cybersecurity measures. And the role of the SEC in enforcing disclosure regulations.
Right.
We've also given our listeners some practical tips on how to practice good cyber hygiene in their everyday lives.
Yeah, we have.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the final takeaway for our listener?
I think the one thing I want them to remember is that cybersecurity is not just a technical issue.
Okay.
It's a human issue. And we all have a role to play in creating a safer and more secure digital world.
By taking those small steps, by being aware, by developing those good digital habits,
Exactly.
we can collectively make a difference.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, and that by working together, we can make cyberspace a more secure and resilient place for everyone.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the SolarWinds breach and its lasting impact on the world of cybersecurity.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.